Welcome, bienvenidos to Sonoma State University and the Social Justice Lecture Series here at Sonoma State. My name is Carlos Cuauhtemoc Ayala. I have the proud honor to be able to introduce the lecture series and introduce the folks who will talk a little bit about the history of the lecture series. When we first started planning this, we said, well, how many people will come? How many people will care? And we talked maybe a couple hundred people come to this event. We have close to 1,000 people here today, so we're very excited about that. I want to thank Andrea Neves and Bart Evans, the two benefactors who created this lecture series and with a vision of promoting social justice for the students at Sonoma State and for the people of the state of California. Andrea, Don Ruben, I would now like to introduce the president of the university who will provide some context for us tonight.
Well, I want to add my words of welcome, bienvenidos, to all of you. This is the most people have been in this room, since this is a very brand new room for us. You are breaking it in, and it's a good break-in. I'm very pleased with it. As Carlos mentioned, we are in the Andrea Neves and Barton Evans Social Justice Lecture Series. And many times you have things that are named for people, but you'll never see those people in bone and flesh. Today, you're going to do that. And I think that's really, really exciting. I'm going to be talking more about Andrea than at Barton, but that's the way things work, especially once you get to know Andrea, which is a dynamo. And Barton is the one who says, yes, dear, let's get it done. That's what they have been married for a long time, and happily so. He has learned that trick. The Andrea Neves has been a faculty member, a professor here at Sonoma State University. I'm not going to tell you for when and how long, because what I tell you, she came in when she was about 12 years old. She also has been a professor at Stanford, and her area has been in the area of education, and she really has looked very strongly about the impact of education on social justice structures, and I think that is her passion. In this series, we have had a great number of individuals who have spoken to the faculty, the staff, and the students at the university. People like Julian Bond, who was here a number of years ago, and last year we had Cornel West. In that same tradition tonight, we have somebody of that same caliber, of that same vision, and of that same interest. One of the things that Andrea and our speakers, that you know who she is, have in common is that they both have formative experience from the Central Valley. Andrea is from Merced County, and Dolores Huerta spent most of her childhood and early years in Stockton. Therefore, they have that deep roots in our agricultural fields, who are the basket of food for California and the nation, but also where the social justice, farmers, workers, union were established and flourished, and still many of their issues are alive and in much need to meet a lot of those needs. Therefore, it's really with great pleasure that I introduce you the Andrea Neves, who is the person behind the Andrea Neves and Barton Evans Social Justice Lecture. And I want, on behalf of the university and on behalf of all of you, to thank them for their generosity, for vision, and their hard work, which is really as important as their contributions. Andrea.
Thank you, President Armiñana. I'd like to, before I say anything about the series, which we're in our 9th year now. Can you hear me back there? Okay. ¿Está bien? ¿Los manos? Sí. Okay. Gracias. I'd like to thank certain people who've helped to put this on. This has been a huge endeavor. This is massive participation of both students and people from the community, and we're so pleased about that. I'd like to thank Presidente Armiñana, and from his office, Andrea Rodriguez. Is Andrea here? She's backstage, still working. Eric Dirksen and his staff, I don't know if Eric's here, but his staff is here, videoing, I think, and monitoring the environment, renverance. I'd like to also thank, particularly because it's from my School of Education, Pamela Van Helsema. Where is she? Pobrecita de ella, because I was calling her all the time. It was back and forth, you know, arranging things. And she's been a godsend. She really has. I'd like to talk just a little bit about this program of social justice. This is our 9th speaker. And we've been very successful in the people that we've brought to campus. The reason why we initiated this program is after 30 some odd years of teaching here. I started in 1972, in the heyday of the strike, huelga, and the boycott on table grapes. But there hasn't been, in that period of time, enough money in the state university system, Sonoma State included, to bring speakers of different voice on campus. So when I retired, and my husband retired, gracias a Dios, de Silicon Valley, he's the wonderful person who financed this. My vision, his money. We said, what can we do to Sonoma State to make an impact on social justice, which has been my passion. I started out here in the Departamento de Mexican American Studies. And that time we could not call ourselves Chicano Studies. They wouldn't permit it. Well, interesting, right? Times have changed. But this has been a few years back, and so all of us were very much involved. And I recognized early on that we needed to have people here on campus from other venues that would speak to social justice issues, not just our own voice. So we got this endowment for social justice, and we said, okay, now we have the endowment, what are we going to do with it? And it was at that point that the School of Education, and at this time it was Martha Rudell, who was the temporary dean, Elaine Leader, I know she's in the audience, who was the dean of social science, but it was mostly Elaine and me. You know, we sat at my kitchen table and we said, what can we do? How can we do this? Elaine, where are you? A ver. can we do? So we said, how can we have the greatest impact? Well, social justice program with speakers, renowned speakers, would be a good start. And so that's what we did, but it is a start. And it's seed money that we produce. So we're always looking forward to more donations. Not necessarily you at this time, estudiantes, because I know the average student has $20,000 in debt by the time you get through. And I don't want to remind you of this, but it's huge. But you got to think in terms of what my husband has always quoted. He does a kind of, I don't know what you call it, but he kind of reinterprets Edward Said. I don't know if some of you might have read him, a famous Palestinian writer, died a couple of years ago, but he talks about the three periods of your life. The first third is preparing, the second third is doing, producing, and the third is giving back. And that's the period that we're at right now. We're trying to give back, and that's very important, particularly for you students, to understand that. You're getting a good education here at Sonoma State University. When you leave here, you'll be working, but I want you to think about giving back. That is extremely important, to give back. Anyway, okay, we've had a lot of different lectures come here. Presidente Armiñana told you of some, Jamaica Kincaid, Alejandro Toledo, the first Native American Presidente de Peru. He was here talking, and he was very, very powerful. We've got some great people come here. And probably for me, because I marched with her when she was 7 months pregnant, going from Madera to Chachilla in the Valle Central de California. She is very, very close to my heart, and I'm very passionate about Dolores Huerta. She is the I was hoping I wouldn't do this. Okay, she was born in New Mexico. Her father was a miner. But she moved to Stockton when she was very young. Grew up in Stockton, and I know what that's like growing up in the San Joaquin Valley. She taught school for a while, but she was under provisional credential. But she was taken back by the number of children who came to school poor and hungry, and decided at that time that her charge wouldn't be in the classroom where she would have limited exposure, limited access to students, but rather that she wanted to do something larger. And so she got involved in community action at that point, and began to organize. Okay, so this led her ultimately to her relationship with Cesar Chavez. And the movie's out tomorrow, so hopefully all of you will see it. Tomorrow's the day that the motion picture will be in the cinemas, so that we can all see. She's been an inspiration to many. I mean, I can't even believe she is the mother of 11 children that she gave birth to. And she marched while she was pregnant, and she organized, and she did all the contracts. She did all the organizing. She was huge, and she hasn't been given the kind of credit that she needs to be given. And at this point, I want to ask you, if any of you, because when I first joined the faculty, it was in 1972, and this was the time of the table grape boycott. You know, we were marching, the students and the faculty of Chicano Studies were marching in front of Safeway here because they were one of the last to, some of us remember this, so they were the last to not recognize the United Farm Workers Union. It was a struggle over a long period of time. Is there anybody in the audience here that's a member of that period that remembers that struggle? Yabe? I want to applaud you because you were on the front lines. You're on the front lines. And this was huge at this time. You know, Sonoma State was really wrapped around a lot of this in those years, in the early 1970s. And ultimately, it came to pass. You know, there was a huge fight between the Teamsters and the United Farm Workers. I remember in one march, you know, they tried to take over. You know, they were, you know, balazos aquí, arriba de. I'm sorry. Maybe it's because I'm saying there was shotguns, you know, over our heads when we were marching. So I'm kind of reticent to maybe say that over the mic, but anyway. Okay. Y ahora voy a seguir en español. Okay. Ahora les presento a una mujer incomparable, amor y devoción. Ella ha dedicado su vida entera para el mejoramiento de los campesinos. Nunca ha pedido nada para ella misma, y eso es muy importante. A través de su enorme dedicación a los campesinos, se formó la United Farm Workers Union al lado de César Chávez. Sería más o mejor decir, él estaba al lado de ella. La lucha ha durado más de 30 años, espero un poquito. Ahora, su persistencia en cualquier tema resulta dando visibilidad a los problemas que todavía existen hoy. Todavía existen hoy. Nosotros aquí en la Universidad de Sonoma State tenemos el honor de tenerla aquí presente con nosotros, la increíble Dolores Huerta.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much. Andrea was speaking in Spanish, so I just switched to Spanish right away without thinking. And thank you, Andrea, for the beautiful introduction. And I want to thank the president and Mr. Ayala and Professor Ayala and all of you that have made it possible for me to be here this evening. And I want to thank all of you also for sharing this evening with us. We have so many important things to talk about. And you know, the most precious thing that we have in our lives, of course, is our time. And so for you to come here tonight and spend this hour with us is very, very important. And I want to talk about several things, but one of the first things I'm going to talk about is kind of a commercial that I'm going to be giving you. And that is that, you know, March 31st is Cesar Chavez's birthday. And one of the things that we're really worried about right now is that March 31st is the last day for people to sign up for the Affordable Care Act. Okay? Now, what's that got to do with anything? Number one, it's been maybe over 60 years or longer that people have always fought in the United States that we would finally have national health insurance for everybody in the United States. As many of you may know, we are the only developed country in the world that does not have national health care. The only developed country in the world. So finally, we finally have it now. Okay, we finally have it. So this is really a historical moment in the United States of America. But as I'm saying this, we have a lot of people that still haven't signed up. And especially in the Latino community, okay? Now what's up with that? And the reason that this is a big problem is because if we do not sign up in the Latino community, especially young people, that the whole thing is not going to work. We're going to deter and we're going to create a big problem for the national health care insurance. Now I know especially young people, they think, oh, I'm going to live forever, but you're not, okay? And we think, I'm never gonna get sick, but you never know, tomorrow you might. Or, might have an accident, and you might injure yourself, and you'll end up in the hospital, and you'll have a huge doctor bill. And another thing too is that when you think about it, well, I'm okay, I don't need health insurance, but then you have to think about your parents, and you have to think about your grandparents, and you have to think about the other people in your community that are going to need health insurance. And so I'm going to ask all of you, because I know the students here, you do have health insurance from the university, from the college here, but I want you to, go out and talk to your friends, and talk to your neighbors, and talk to your relatives, and ask them, have you signed up yet? And they have just a few more days from now till the 31st of March, and just a few more days to sign up. And tell them this is not like auto insurance, okay? You don't need auto insurance till you buy the car. But with health insurance, you can't wait till you get sick or you go to the hospital. You need to buy it before you get sick and before you go to the hospital. And if you don't, you might end up with a hospital bill that is thousands and thousands of dollars. You never know. A friend of mine, she didn't have her health insurance, went to the hospital, came, and it was just like an overnight, but they had to do all these tests on her. She had an $8,000 bill. An $8,000 bill. Okay, so tell people not to be afraid, not to be confused, all of this crazy things that we've been hearing on television or in the newspapers. And when we think about how much time does it take to sign up for health insurance, well, if you watch the novela, it's an hour, right? If you play a video game, it's what, 2 hours, maybe longer? And if you go to a movie, it's only a little while. So when you think about the time that it takes to have all of that entertainment, it's a lot less time to sign up for health insurance. And you're going to protect yourself, you're going to protect your family, you're going to help the whole country because we have to make this work. So I'm going to ask you to give Cesar Chavez a birthday present. And it's a birthday present that will also help you, and that is, of course, to sign up for health insurance and talk to at least 5 people that you know, people in your family, especially you young folk, talk to your friends to make sure that they sign up. Can we do that? Yes. All right, thank you. The other thing that we have coming up on March 31st is, of course, as I said, Cesar Chavez's birthday, and we all know that there is a movie about Cesar Chavez, and that was referred to by Andrea, that is coming up. And this, of course, this movie is important for us to go see, and we want people to try to go see it this weekend. And the reason why we want people to see it this weekend, because in Hollywood, they will determine how many theaters they're going to put the movie in. Because they have their calculations, and depending on the people that see it the first weekend, then they decide how many movies they're going to put it in. And not only that, but if a lot of us go see the movie, maybe it will inspire Hollywood to do more movies, right, about our experience. Because we're not out there. We're not out there right now, and I don't know if people saw the Oscars the other day, but there were no Latino presenters at the Oscars, right? No Latino presenters at all. So that means that we're kind of invisible, and our stories have to be told. And we know that unless our stories are told, that unfortunately we're going to continue the kind of discrimination against Latinos that we have seen in recent years, the very vicious type of propaganda, especially against our undocumented people in our country. And I'm sure that many of you in this audience, like myself and my family, all of the propaganda was against the undocumented people. In reality, in realidad, it was really against all of us who are Latinos, right? Because it didn't stop against people who are undocumented. And we have seen the manifestation of that in many of the kind of laws that they've been trying to pass, and they have passed in the United States of America, like voter suppression laws. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the movie of Cesar Chavez because I know y'all going to go see it. But I just want to mention a couple of the things that are not in the movie. One of the things that is not in the movie, unfortunately, is that it doesn't really show the kind of work that we did in the Farm Workers Union in terms of civic engagement, of getting people to vote and to register to vote and support good people that are running for office. In the movie, you're going to see one of the fasts that Caesar did in 1968. He did a fast for 25 days against violence because he wanted to make sure that we could win the struggle without any type of violence. Another thing about the movie that is very impressive is when you see the kind of obstacles that the farm workers had. So we not only had the big, giant agribusiness community against the farm workers, and we were really struggling to get the very basic things that farm workers needed. Things like toilets in the fields that farm workers didn't have. Some of you whose parents or grandparents were farm workers, they will tell you about the time, especially for the women, how difficult that was. Because, you know, if you were a woman and you were working in the fields, there was nowhere for you to go to the bathroom. People had to get towels or sheets to be able to cover a woman, you know, when she had to do her duties over there. And so that was one of the things that we fought for. Just getting cold drinking water, you know, individual paper cups. Because what they would do, and you'll see this in the movie, they would have like a big old jug, and they would have maybe one can, maybe a beer can or a soda can that had the top kind of taken off, and everybody had to drink out of that one can. So these are the basic things that we fought for. And the kind of things that the farm workers had to go through just to, you know, be able to get cold drinking water without having to pay for it, you know, and toilets in the fields. And the kind of opposition that we had, as I mentioned, the big agribusiness growers. Then you had the police, and you had the sheriffs, and you had the judges that they owned. And then you had the governor of California, Ronald Reagan. And then you had the President of the United States, President Nixon. And these were all of the forces that the farm workers had against them. And the only way that we were able to win is to leave the fields and send farm workers out to the cities all over the United States of America. And when they went out to those cities, what they did is they talked to the public, they talked to churches and to labor unions and community organizations and schools, and they asked people to support the farm workers with one simple way to do it. Don't eat grapes, okay? Just don't eat grapes. Tell your store to take out the grapes. And they did. So as a result of that, we had 17 million Americans that didn't eat grapes. 17 million Americans, and that's what finally brought some of those basic services to farm workers. And the other benefits that were won are and these you will not see in the movie, but they were very simple benefits like unemployment insurance for farm workers, which they didn't have. You know, when the work finished, they had to follow the crops from place to place because they couldn't stay in one place to be able to get a check, you know, after they finished working. And that was changed after we did that organization. And how influential is that? Let me tell you. I don't know how many of you have heard from Jose Fernandez, the astronaut. This is a farm worker, right? And I remember when we started organizing, one of the farm workers said, they will put a man on the moon before farm workers get unemployment insurance. And guess what? We did. We put a man on the moon before farm workers got unemployment insurance. Well, Jose Hernandez's family, they were a family from Michoacan, but they were migrant workers in California, and they would follow the crops. Well, after we got unemployment insurance, the Hernandez family could stay in one place. Jose Hernandez could go to school, and he went to college, and he got a scholarship, and went to work at the Livermore lab, and he became an astronaut. And guess what? He was the first farm worker on the moon. And the sad thing about this is that even though we did get some of these benefits for farm workers, like unemployment insurance, disability insurance for when farm workers get sick outside the job, they have somebody, they can get a check while they're disabled. If they're hurt on the job, they can get their injuries covered, and the time that they're sick is covered by workers' compensation. They, again, have the right to organize. And the sad thing is that in other states, like New York State, which is a progressive state, one would think, when you have other states throughout the country, like in the South, Texas, Florida, and all these other places, guess what? Farm workers do not have that right. They don't have unemployment insurance. They don't have the right to organize. So even though almost 40 years ago, we were able to get these benefits for farm workers, and these other states, people that still do not have these benefits, which really shows that we have a long way to go. The other thing I want to mention about Cesar Chavez is that, he did that one fast and delayed for 25 days, which you're going to see in the movie. He went without water. without food. He just had water and Holy Communion because he wanted the farmer to make sure the farmers did not turn against violence. But then he did another fast. He did a fast in Arizona for another 25 days. And what they had done in Arizona, they had passed a law that if you said boycott anything, you could go to prison for 6 months. If you said huelga, strike, you could go to prison. And so Cesar went to Arizona and he did a fast. And he did another fast for 25 days. But what he did, when he finished that fast, he stayed in Arizona. And he started there at the Mexican border, there in San Luis, Arizona, and Yuma, Arizona, and he went all the way to Arizona, and guess what he did? Every place he went, they registered people to vote. They registered people to vote. And for the first time in the state of Arizona, they had the first Native American that was elected to the legislature, the first African American, and the first Latino to the state senate, Manuel Peña, okay? And that was the vote legislation. And the reason I want to mention that, because unfortunately the movie does not really show that part of the movement about how important it is that we register and that we vote if we really want to be able to change anything in our United States of America. And again, in our community, the Latino community, we have almost 6 million people who could become citizens and have not become citizens. We have another few million that do not vote. You know, and we have a whole bunch of others that are registered to vote and still do not vote. And so that really shows, that really keeps our community behind, especially when we're working on issues like immigration reform that we need right now. But if our people are not engaged, that really, we can't make the changes that we need to make. And so that's one thing that, again, we have to be civically engaged if we're going to make any kind of a difference. And also, I just want to say that in order to get that civic engagement that we need to all work together. And we need to have men and women work side by side to make it happen. And so we were just recently celebrating Women's History Month, so I've just got to talk a little bit about the women, okay? And we have this issue oftentimes that women don't really think that they are able to do what men do. They had a survey that was done at one of the Eastern colleges, and they asked male students how many of them thought they were qualified to run for office. So 85% of the guys said, yes, we're qualified. When they asked the female students the same question, only 30% of them thought that they were qualified. So why is that? Because often, we as women, we don't think that we're prepared actually to get in there and do a job that maybe is unknown to us, that we're not sure of. But men don't have that problem, right? Only women have that problem. So one of the things that we have to do is we have to know that we can learn on the job and that we can get in there and really learn it. But the other big problem that we have is in our society about the way we raise our women, okay? In our society, we raise our women actually to be victims. Because from the time that we are little girls, we are told, don't go out there and get that white dress dirty. Don't climb the tree. You might fall down and hurt yourself. Are you wrestling with your brother or your sister? That isn't ladylike, no? And then we're also told by Walt Disney, don't worry about a thing. Prince Charming is on his way, okay? Prince Charming is going to come, and he's going to give you a big kiss, and he's going to wake you up, and you're going to live happily ever after, right? But then often what happens is that you have a pretender Prince Charming who comes. Te da un besote, gives you a big old kiss, okay? Gives you a big old kiss, and there goes school, and there goes our career, and then baby's daddy is gone. Okay? And so, we have to change the way that we raise our women. We have to, when we think of the animal kingdom, who's the most ferocious? Is it the male or the female species? The female. So, what happened to us, right? What happened to us? So we have to start changing the way that we raise our children, our women. You know, we have to raise our women so that they can be strong, so that they can defend themselves physically. And when I say that, because we're sitting here right now, we have women that are being beaten. We have women that are being raped. We have women that are being killed because somebody thought they owned that woman's body. And so we have to raise our women to be strong physically, to defend themselves physically, to defend themselves emotionally, so that they cannot be seduced, right? And also psychologically strong, because so our women cannot be dominated or manipulated. So that a woman then can decide for herself what she wants to do with her life. And you heard the introduction that I have 11 children, right? And that was my choice. But we know that many women will want to decide not to have 11 children. Probably not anybody in the room here that wants to have 11 children. And so I do believe that women have a right to choose. You know, my own children, I have 2 of my daughters have 1 child, 1 of my sons has 0, and my daughter Juanita has 2 dogs, you know. And so that is important that we do fight for a woman's right to choose, because, you know, right now throughout the United States of America, they are passing all kinds of laws against a woman's reproductive justice, you know, against their choice. In Texas, they have closed down clinics because they want the clinics to become like hospitals, and so that women don't have that right. If they need a medical procedure to terminate a pregnancy unwanted or dangerous, they can't do it. And so these are things that we have to think about and that we have to fight. And when we think of, why do we need women? We need women in positions where we make choices. Because even though we're the majority of the population, we're not there. We think that we're the strongest country in the world, but when it comes to women's representation in government, in all of the developed countries, again, we are number 70 in the world. Number 70. In our own United States Congress, and this also pertains to ethnicity, not just gender, but you know, we're maybe 17% in terms of women in our U.S. Congress. And we as women have a different intuition. You know, we think differently. You know, when Cesar Chavez and I, we would look at a problem and we would argue about issues. Caesar, when we had the big great boycott, Caesar wanted to boycott potatoes. And I said, Caesar, when people think of potatoes, they don't think of California, they think of Idaho, right? And so, you know, we were able to argue that out, and we finally decided on boycotting grapes, right? But sometimes I had to argue with people. You know, sometimes as women too, like we're afraid to stand up because if a woman gets to be really assertive, they use the B word, right? Because, you know, if a man is strong, they say, oh, he's strong, he's wonderful, he's just, you know, right out there. But then if a woman tries to be strong, then, oh man, they use the B word, right? So, you know, it's hard for women to stand up for ourselves. It's hard for women to take credit for what we do. And I want to say to all the women out there, when you do something or you think something and you got to get out there and speak your voice, don't be afraid to take credit for what you do. Just think of Oprah, okay? And I like to say, at this point, I'll just say it out there. In the movie, you're going to see that Cesar Chavez says, "Si se puede." I'm the one that came up with "Si se puede." Not Cesar Chavez. While we're saying all of this that we need, because we need our women to be out there, we need women representation, and I'm going to quote Coretta Scott King. Coretta Scott King said, "Unless women take power, we will never have peace in the world." Think about that. Unless women take power, we will never have peace in the world. So that means that we as women, we have to think about what we can do, how we step up there. But at the same time, I want to say to the men in the room that we've also got to be supportive of our women, right? And to the young people, especially the educators, when you talk to the high school kids out there, and you tell all those young men, think of every woman as if she were your sister or your mother, all right? As if she were your sister or your mother, because we've got to support our women. And we've also, for all of the soon-to-be mothers, because I know many of you do not have children in this audience, and to all of the parents and grandparents out there, we've got to teach our men to do what women do, like cooking, cleaning, okay? And dancing also, we have to do how to dance. Yeah, because today's women, they're just going to be too busy. We've got too much work to do out there, right? We're not going to have time to be, we have to take care of ourselves, and so our guys have to learn how to take care of themselves also. And, but the other thing too is I'm going to use the F word, okay? Feminist. So we want our women and our men to be feminists. What is a feminist? A feminist is a person who cares about women's rights, who cares about immigrants' rights, who cares about workers' rights, our LGBT community, all right, cares about their rights also, people's rights to marry, and who care about the environment. And I want to say a kind of a statement about that too, because I know we have these difficult conversations in our families. And I want to remind people of lo que dijo Benito Juárez. You know, Benito Juárez was the president of Mexico after the independence from Spain. And he had a very famous saying, el respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz, okay? In English, that means respecting other people's rights is peace. So, I chose to have 11 children. That's my choice and my business, right? My choice and my business. Somebody else decides not to have any, that's their business. Who are we to judge if somebody falls in love with someone of the same sex, okay? That, if they want to marry that person, it's none of our business. It's their business. And so we also have to be, I think, messengers of peace. Because we talk about social justice, this means that you don't have discrimination against anybody, right? And so, you know, when we hear those people, you know, the haters, you know, they come out and they attack immigrants and they attack women and they attack people because they're gay or lesbian or transgender, bisexual. Okay, let's remind them, lo que dijo Benito Juárez, respecting other people's rights is peace. And this is a good way, especially to our families, that are still kind of confused because of what they hear, you know, when they go to Mass on Sundays, whatever, you know, you know, take out that confusion and give them a way that they can really talk about these issues, because I know sometimes it's very difficult for them to do that. But we really have to do this if we are thinking about having peace. So a feminist is a person who, as I said, cares about women's rights, immigrants' rights, environmental rights, you know, workers' rights, and LGBT rights. These are the feminists. And this is what we have to promote, because we don't also want to think of promoting someone just because they're a woman, but they actually really do not have the same kind of values that we have. You know, this is a different world, it's a new world. As Rigoberta Menchú says, when they talked about the end of the world, they were talking about the world that was. We are now beginning with a new world, the world that is going to be. And you are the ones that are going to make this new world. You are the ones that are going to make it happen. Thank you. Of course, I want to kind of talk a little bit now about the immigration issue. And you know, again, we talk to ourselves a lot about immigration, but we really never talk about why do we have people that live their beautiful homes in Chiapas, Oaxaca, Guatemala, places that people from here go to as tourists. So what causes them to come to the United States where they're going to come here and suffer and work as hard as they do? We never ask that question. But we need to ask that question, because when we answer that question, we have to look at ourselves and our education policy. I mean, our foreign policies, our free trade policies like NAFTA. You know, this is the reason that people become displaced. When NAFTA passed in the United States, I'll bet most of us here in the room didn't even know what was happening. Who knew? The people in Oaxaca, right? In Chiapas. They demonstrated because they knew that the free trade agreements were going to devastate their economy, and they did. When we think of the corn, the maize, which started in Mexico, that's where the corn is from. But we have all of the small corn farmers in Mexico that have been put out of work, because guess where the corn in Mexico comes from now? The United States. Mexico imports more corn from the United States than what they grow in Mexico today. And the reason that happens is because our corn is cheap because we subsidize our corn, and then we send it, to Mexico. So the small campesino farmer in Mexico cannot compete with agribusiness from Kansas and Illinois and Iowa. There's no way they can compete. So they're put out of work. When we have the Walmart stores, like the big box stores like Walmart, and they put up their shop in Mexico, all the little small and mom and pop shopkeepers, they're put out of work. When we have the maquiladoras, and they also put up their places over there on the border to make American products in Mexico that are shipped over here, all of that profit comes back to the United States, it doesn't stay in Mexico. So all of those people are put out of work. And what is Mexico? A few years ago, there were 80,000 people on the border in Mexico that were put out of work because the maquiladoras, they left Mexico and they went to China. Where did those people go? They came over here. And so we have to change our foreign policies. And if we look at what we did after World War II with Japan and China, we defeated those countries in the war. But then we lent them money. It was called the Marshall Plan, right? We lent them money to rebuild their economies. And so you have the Japanese companies that we know, Toyota, Mitsubishi, Sony, all of these companies were built with American tax dollars. Volkswagen in Germany. And then after that we said, you know what? Keep the money, you don't have to pay us back, okay? And they did. So we used American tax dollars so they could build their economies. We didn't send American companies there to take over their economy, right? And this is what we do in Latin America. American companies go in there and take over the economy. And that is economic colonization. And if some of the countries in Latin America don't agree with what the United States is doing, if they say, okay, we don't want to, cooperate with the U.S. on your free trade policies, then we don't like those companies, right? Those countries, we don't like them. So we don't like Hugo Chavez because he said the oil of Venezuela belongs to Venezuela. Can you think, the Evo Morales in Bolivia, he says the natural gas of Bolivia belongs to the people of Bolivia. It doesn't belong to the United States. Remember during when we were doing all the peace marches before the Iraq War? I think some of you might have been at those marches. Some of the people were carrying these big signs and they said, how did our oil get under their sand? How did our oil get under their sand? Okay? And so, this is one of the policies that we have to change in the United States. Instead of, trying to take over the resources of other countries, help them develop their own economies instead of saying that their resources belong to the United States of America. Think about when you consider that we are the only developed country in the world that does not own our natural resources. The only developed country in the world that does not own our natural resources. Right here in California, the state of California, about 60% of the petroleum that we use comes from right here, from California. Who knew that, right? There's a country in Scandinavia, one of those S countries, socialist, okay? Norway. In Norway, actually, there was a news report that Norway, a couple of years ago, Norway had a $400 billion surplus. Where did they get all that money? From their oil. They own their own oil, okay? The big problem in Norway is they were afraid people were going to forget to learn how to work, okay? They were going to forget how to work because they just had so much money. And so we should think about that, when we pay our phone bill, when we pay our electricity. There are some places like Los Angeles, they do own their water and power, but most places don't. We have other companies that own it. And this shouldn't be. The natural resources of a country should belong to the people of the country, because then we have accountability. Because when you have corporate ownership of our natural resources, there's no accountability at all. When we think about that every time our gas bill goes up, our electricity bill goes up. But these are things, of course, that we have to think about for the future. But eventually some of these things could happen, that we can take better control of our resources. Because we are now living in a world where we have such an uneven economic system. When we think of that, we have the 1%, right, that have so much of the wealth, and the 99% that do not. There are 400 individuals in the United States that have more wealth than 1,500,000 people. Think about that. 400 individuals that have more wealth than 1,500,000 of us. You know, when I read the newspaper, the New York Times, I go to the business page, the business section. I call it the crime report, okay? Because when you look at the business section, you will read about some of these CEOs. I think like the president of AT&T was getting something like $14 million a year. One person, $14 million a year. Another CEO is getting $16 million a year. I was talking to one of the congresspersons that I know when the whole economic collapse went down, and they were trying to negotiate with the bankers and trying to put a cap on what they could earn in 1 year. And the least that they would even consider talking about was $2 million a year. $2 million a year. Well, you know, I don't care how many millions you have, you can only wear one suit of clothes a day, right? You can only eat 3 meals a day. And so, you know, this is really wrong. You know, we should not have that kind of disparity that we have in a democracy. In our minimum wage, you know, there's a lot of talk about the minimum wage might go up to $10 an hour in a couple of years. But if our minimum wage would have kept up with the cost of living, our minimum wage today should be over $25 an hour. $25 an hour, yeah. And this might be hard for the people that are owning the vineyards out there, but really, farm workers out there should be getting $25 an hour. And I know maybe for the small operators, it would be very hard for you to manage that. You know, but we're just so far behind right now. It's so far behind. And so we have to think about how are we going to correct some of these situations. Well, one of them, of course, is to support labor unions. You know, because labor unions are the only way that we can redistribute the wealth, you know? The only way that we can redistribute the wealth. And if you don't have labor unions, if you do not have an educated citizenry, then we cannot have a democracy. If we do not have a middle class, and this is what labor unions create, they create the middle class. If we do not have that, we do not have a democracy. And when people think, okay, what is labor? And I know that in our country here, we don't really get a good education about what labor unions are. What is a labor union? It's an organization of workers. That's all it is. It's an organization of workers. Now, when you think of the employers, like even say I'll talk about farm workers, you know, the employers have a lot of organizations. They have the Farmer Federation, they have the Western Growers Association, the vintners have the Wine and Grape Association, the Citrus Association. They have maybe 5 or 6 organizations that they belong to and that they reduce to. Well, workers only have one organization, their labor union. Their own organization that can represent them in Washington or in Sacramento or any place that they have to be represented at. So when we think of what is a union, it's just an organization of workers. And they're democratic organizations. If somehow the leadership of that organization isn't good, they can, you know, vote them out, organize and vote them out. So think about that when you're thinking about labor. And right now in the United States of America, a very small percentage of workers belong or are represented by labor unions because there have been so many laws against labor unions today. So again, when you see a picket line out there, go out there and join that picket line and support the labor unions as much as you can. Yeah. And of course, connected with that is education. We have to have an educated citizenry. And when I'm talking about the kind of the corporate control that we have in our country, you know what? We are not consumers, right? We are citizens. We are citizens. We are not consumers. We were not born to make other people rich, you know? We really weren't, you know? We were born actually to make every one of us that has been born, has been put on earth to make the world a better place. That's why we were born. But we know that it's very difficult, again, when we do not have all of our people that have the right or don't have the opportunity to have an education. And we know in our Latino community, with my organization, the Dolores Huerta Foundation, we have been fighting that because we have so many of our children, of our students, that are being pushed out of schools. And the number of push-outs and expulsions and suspensions among our African American children is like 500% above the norm. For Latinos, it's about 300% above the norm. And so, and this has been, of course, legislation that has been passed. They've got these rules like willful defiance. If a kid talks back to a teacher or somebody on the yard, and then they're suspended, they're kids. They're supposed to talk back, right? They're teenagers. That's what teenagers do. So we've got to change those laws to make sure that our kids are able to stay in school. And then we've also got to educate our parents so that they can know how to defend their kids and defend students. And then we've got to get ourselves elected to the school boards. And we've got to take over the school boards to protect our kids. And part of us getting ourselves on those school boards is because also we have to change the way that we educate our youth. We've got to be able to put what our people have done, what our people have contributed from kindergarten through 12th grade. People should not have to wait till they get into college to learn about ethnic studies, African American studies, Asian studies, etc. If kids of color are not taught from the time that they're in grammar school and high school about the contributions that their people have made, then they never really feel that they're part of this country. And then our white kids, you know, they have this entitlement because they don't know either. You know, I was recently in Virginia when the governor of Virginia, Terry McAuliffe, was elected, the first Democrat in a whole bunch of years. And we were at the governor's mansion in Virginia, and Terry McAuliffe was saying the mansion in Virginia is the oldest governor's mansion in the United States of America. And he said it was built by Thomas Jefferson. And I thought, I don't think so. It was built by Thomas Jefferson's slaves, not by Thomas Jefferson. And how many people know that the White House and the Congress was built by African slaves, you know? How many people know about the people, somebody over there didn't know. You know, how many people know about, you know, that California was built, that the Native Americans, of course, were the first slaves. Of course, the land that we're sitting on right now belonged to the Native Americans. Have we ever said thank you? You know, shouldn't Native American children have a free scholarship to any college of their choice in the United States of America? You know? Shouldn't the descendants of African slaves also have that same opportunity because all that they went through? And again, people don't know, like I came from Stockton, California, and thank you, Andrea, for mentioning that. But you know, how many of them know that the lands over there, those great rich farmlands in Stockton, that they were drained by the Chinese and the Japanese to make them farmable. And once they did that, then the Associated Farmers passed a law in California that the Japanese and the Chinese could not own land. And they could not marry Caucasians to make sure that they didn't get a hold of that land. By the way, Mexicans were considered Caucasians, okay? That's another story. And then that applied that Oriental Exclusion Act with the miscegenation clause in it that they could marry, then they applied it to the Filipinos. All of these Filipinos, tens of thousands that were brought to the United States, to California especially to work, and then they couldn't get married. They couldn't get married. And I remember growing up as a young teenager in Stockton with all of the discrimination where they had signs in the hotels, no Filipinos allowed, and places in the restaurants, you know. All of that discrimination just because somebody wanted to make sure that Asians could not own that land. And it wasn't until World War II when the Filipinos, through the Hukbalahag and the guerrillas and the Filipinos were able to save the United States in that World War II, that they finally changed that law. They got rid of that law. But in the meantime, the Manongs, the tens and thousands of them that came to the United States were never able to marry. And they died as single men. I mean, what a great travesty that is, the kind of discrimination that happened in our country. So, you know, we've got to make sure that we get on those school boards. We've got to make sure that we change, get our stories into those laws. And even as we're speaking about this right now, and you probably know this in Sonoma State, but over at Cal State Los Angeles, they're trying to take ethnic studies out of the curriculum as we speak. as we speak, just like they did in Arizona. So those forces of hatred that I talked about, they're very well organized, and they're always working, you know. So we've got to be vigilant, and we've actually got to work harder than they do, you know. And we've got to make sure that we have an educated citizenry. There was a Spanish poet, Jose Ortega y Gasset, from Spain, before the time of the dictator Franco came in, and he wrote a book called The Revolution of the Masses. The Revolution of the Masses. And what that book was about is about if we do not have an educated citizenry, then we will have mob rule. Think about that. If we do not have an educated citizenry, we will have mob rule. And when we think about what happened with the economic meltdown, you know, wouldn't you kind of call that mob rule? You know, when you have this kind of corporate control where they make the decisions, right? And then the rest of us are just helpless. I think it's a sin when you think about our United States of America, again, how rich we are, that we have so many homeless people and so many empty houses. So many homeless people and so many empty houses. But we have to have in our country, in our United States, that we can really change some of these things. But we have to do it with an electoral revolution, right? An electoral revolution. We can actually go out there and we can make the changes. You know, when Cesar and I started organizing farm workers, and they would say to us, how are you going to organize the farm workers? They're poor, they don't speak English, they're not citizens, you know? How could you possibly organize them? And our answer was, to the workers, you have power, okay? You have power, but the power is in your person. The power is in your person, and that's all you need is your body. That's all you need. But you can't do it by yourself. You've got to come together, and you've got to come together with other people, and then taking direct nonviolent action, and this is the way that we can make changes. This is the only way, by working together. And there's a joke that Caesar used to tell all the time. I want to tell you a little story. It was one of Caesar's favorite stories when we're trying to organize the workers. And this is about a jinete, a horseman, a cowboy. And this cowboy, you know, he was on his horse, and he's riding down on his horse, and he's got this big old whip, and he sees a little dog, and he hits the dog with the whip, and the dog goes yelping away. And then he's riding along, and then he sees a cow, and he sees the cow, and he hits the cow with his whip, and the cow goes moo moo, running away. Then he rides up, and he sees a tree, and he curls his whip, and he looks up, and there's a beehive. And then he says, I better not, they're organized, okay? So basically, this is what we have to do, you know. We have got to get organized. And it sounds like it's a big task, but it's not really a big task, because the one thing that we have to understand is that we do have the power in our persons to make changes. But the thing is that if we don't, step up to the plate, if we don't get involved, if we're just on the sidelines watching things go by, then we're not going to be able to make any changes. We've got to take responsibility. We've got to take the responsibility and realize that each one of us can make a contribution, and we can do something to make everybody's life better. And we've got to know what's happening. We've got to listen to the news, you know? You've got to, if you can get on your computers, MSNBC, listen to Rachel Maddow, listen to Amy Goodman, you know, listen to Colbert, Jon Stewart, okay? You know, we got to find out what's going on, keep informed, keep involved. It always bothers me when I remember once I was sitting at the airport and the news was on and there was all these young men there, and on the news, they were talking, this was a few years ago during the war in Iraq, and on the news, it was saying about all these young people that are getting killed in Iraq. And I was looking at these young men to see if there was going to be any kind of response. And they were talking about what they were going to do for their vacation. They weren't even listening to what was going on in the news. And I thought, you know, we're such a powerful democracy. You know, we have so much power. But, you know, if we don't use that power, then things are not going to change. And I want to ask all of you out there too, you got to run for office, okay? You got to run for office. And when I say that, I know people think, wow, I really couldn't do that. Just think of George Bush, okay? run for office. 60% of the people in the U.S. Congress are millionaires. 60%. So we've got to change the law so we can have public financing so that you can run for office, you don't have to be a millionaire to run for office. And these are things that we can actually do through legislation by getting good people elected to office. And we don't often have to think that we've got to have all the money in the world to do that. We've got to just organize at the grassroots level. I like to remind people of the last election when Meg Whitman spent $160 million, okay? $160 million. Jerry Brown spent $35 million. Think about that. And how did Jerry Brown win? Because all of the housekeepers in Los Angeles and the janitors and the laborers and the farm workers, they were going door to door, getting people to come out to vote. Okay? It's just the people power. This is exactly what we need. We need people power. In the last election, how many of you remember Proposition 30? Anybody remember that? Okay, this was on the ballot. What did we do with Proposition 30? In Proposition 30, we passed a law that millionaires have to pay 3% more in taxes, in state taxes, 3% more. If you make $500,000, you pay 2% more. You make $250,000 a year, you pay 1% more. California was in a deficit. As a result of that law, which we voted on and passed, okay? Now, the state of California is in a surplus. But the good thing about Proposition 30, we got over $6 billion into the state for education. How about that? And the governor and the legislature have passed a law that says that money needs to go for low-income students, okay? And it needs to go for English learners, and it needs to go for foster children. But now we have to make sure that all of those school boards out there use the money for what they're supposed to use it, okay? So there's still a lot of work to do to make sure the money goes where it should. But this shows us that we, as citizens of the country, that we can make the changes that we need. So I'm gonna ask you all a question, okay? I'm gonna ask all a question. I'm gonna say, who's got the power? We do. And I want you to say, we've got the power, okay? And I want you to shout it out really loud. I want to say, who's got the power? I want you to say, we've got the power. And I want to say, what kind of power? And I want you to say, people power, all right? Okay, let's do it. Let's do it. Okay, everybody. Who's got the power? We've got the power. What kind of power? People power. Okay, let's do that even louder. Some people still aren't sure. We want you all to really, really feel it, okay? Really, really feel it. Okay, let's say it really louder. Who's got the power? We've got the power. What kind of power? People power. Who's got the power? We've got the power. What kind of power? People power. Oh, great. Oh, now I'm going to ask another question. How many of you voted in the last election? Let me see your hands. Okay, another question. How many of you actually went out and knocked on doors or phoned back to get other people out to vote? Okay, our numbers dropped a lot. So I'm going to ask you for the next election, please, whether it be a primary or in November, to please go out there, put your tennis shoes on, and go out there and work either for a candidate or a proposition and knock on those doors to get people out to vote. And I want to tell you, it's the best leadership learning experience, okay? It's the best leadership learning experience. My leadership experience came when I was knocking on doors and came to a house of farm workers. And there was no dirt on the floor, no linoleum, no wood on the floor, only dirt. And the furniture were orange crates and cardboard boxes. And that made me feel really sad, and at the same time made me feel really angry. I knew farm workers worked very, very hard, and I hated to see the way that they were living, and to see the children raggedy and with, barefoot, and knowing they were not getting enough food to eat. And that's when I made my decision that I was going to quit being a teacher and become an organizer. Luckily, I had met Fred Senior, who taught us how to organize. And so, but you don't really learn that unless you go and you talk to people, and you have to go where the poor people are at, okay? And a lot of people, now in our country we discriminate against poor people. And I want to say to all the college students in the room, in the Spanish language, When you say that you're educado, that you're educated, that means basically that you are a civil person, that you have a conscience, that you care about other people. When you, in the Spanish language, when you go to school, you are preparado, right? You're prepared. So that means that you don't have to have a college degree to be educated. I'm sure that the janitors on this campus and people that work in food services or whatever, there are many of them that are educados, right? They just never had the opportunity to go to school. And so when you get out of college, come back and work for the poor and help the people that need help. We know you're going to have a lot of college loans, okay, that you have to pay off. And someday, of course, we need to work to make college education free, right? But in the meantime, when you come out of school, figure out ways that you can kind of, design your life, which means that you also have to be careful not to get all those economic chains, all of those burdens on yourself, that you can't do anything. Which means all those credit cards that they send in the mail, tear them up. Okay, don't even use them. Don't even get caught into that trap. Leave yourself economically free. Remember, Cesar Chavez only went to the 8th grade. He didn't even get a chance to go to high school, but the man was a genius, right? And he was always reading. He always had a book under his arm. And I don't know if we have time for questions, but I just want to say this also, that isn't it about time we ended racism? I'm going to tell you a really easy way to do this, okay? Really easy way. Okay. And since you're students, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, okay? What is the name of our human race? Human. No? Scientific. Como dicen en nuestro libro, like esqueletos, I believe in science, okay? Homo sapien. Homo sapien, okay? Everybody say it, Homo sapien. Okay, we have one human race, okay? We have a lot of different ethnic groups. We have a lot of different cultures, a lot of different nationalities, but only one human race, Homo sapien, right? Like we just said. Now, where did our human race begin? Africa. How about that? Okay, our human race began in Africa, went across the planet, went to Asia. People got lighter in skin, came down to the Bering Strait to the Americas. One of our tribes got lost. They went up north where it's really cold and they lost their color, okay? And now they have to go to the tanning salon or to get their color back. And what does that mean? That means that we are all Africans, okay? We're all Africans of different shades and colors. And we can say to the Ku Klux Klan, to the White Citizens Council, to those people of the Tea Party, maybe not all of them, but there's certainly some of them, to the Minutemensos, we can say to them, get over it, you're Africans, okay? Get over it, get over it. I share a word with you. It's from South Africa. It's a Zulu word. It means we the people here at Sonoma State, in our community, we the people here are coming together to fight for justice, okay? Yes. We're coming together to fight for justice. And one of the things that Cornel West that I loved, his statement, he said, justice is the public face of love. Think about that. Justice is the public face of love. If we turn that around, injustice is the public face of hate. Okay? So we're all about justice here in this room tonight. So the word I want to share with you is a Zulu word from South Africa, and it means we, the people here, are coming together to fight for justice. Okay? The word is wozani. Can you say that word? Wozani. So I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and I want everybody to shout wozani at the top of your lungs. Okay? Wozani, let's go. 1, 2, 3. Wozani! Okay, we're committed to fight for justice. And I'm going to say, que viva Cesar Chavez. Everybody shout a big old viva. Que viva Cesar Chavez! Que viva! Que viva los emigrantes! Que viva! Que viva los feministas! Que viva! Que viva los estudiantes! Que viva! Que viva los maestros! Que viva! All right.
Thank you, Dolores. That was beautiful, very inspiring. And as I look across the crowd from up here, it's a very different perspective from down there. And I know there's Dolores Huertas and Senator Chavez out there. Yeah, that will be leading us to new places. So we want to take a few questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. And we will start with this gentleman here. We have mics in the audience.
Okay, Dolores, I want to ask you, were you ever reluctant in accepting a Freedom Award from Barack Obama, an individual representative of a power structure depriving people of their freedom worldwide?
I'm sorry, I didn't get all of that. Break it down, okay?
You received the Presidential Medal of Freedom
Uh-huh.
in 2012.
Uh-huh.
I just want to ask you, did you ever have any second thoughts about accepting that award, given Obama represents the opposite of freedom for so many people worldwide?
I'll answer that in two phrases, okay? Number one, I was very blessed to receive the Medal of Freedom Award from a president who was there. Because I felt when I received that award that the president was recognizing community organizers, which is what I do, you know, getting out, getting people together so that they can show them that they have power, how they can change things, right? And so I felt very blessed to receive that. We know that there are many countries all over the world where there's a lot of oppression. I don't know how much the president can or cannot do in terms of many of those countries. I can't speak for the president, but I don't think that he is a person that really represents oppression. And the other thing too is, I just want to say this. Remember that the president inherited a big old mess, okay? He inherited 2 wars, he inherited an economic meltdown that he inherited. And when we think of who's in control of our country, okay, you have the military-industrial complex, right? You have the prison-industrial complex. We have more people in prison than any other country in the world, including India or China. We have billions of people. In California, we're number 1. Then you have the hospital-industrial complex. You have the education-industrial complex, okay? And we got this president, first African-American, that many politicians hate just because he's black, right? And he's trying to make a change. And so I think he's chipping away and he's trying to make a change as much as he can. Oh, and the other thing, he has to try to stay alive. He has had more death threats, over 1,000 death threats the president has had, than any other president in the United States of America. So I felt proud to have received that medal from him.
Thank you very much for your question.
Hello?
Hello.
It's an honor to speak to you, and I will speak in English because my Spanish is terrible. This is more of a comment, and excuse me if you were aware of this. The Hymno de Alegria, Beethoven's Ode to Joy. Bill Moyers recently was speaking about it, how it's used in Chile, Venezuela, South Africa, England, everywhere, as a non-violent means to chant that famous theme against oppression. That's all. Thank you.
Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question? Yes?
How old were you when you were working with Cesar Chavez?
Okay. Before I answer that, I'm also going to add a little bit of my own biography. I was actually a Girl Scout from the time I was 8 to the time I was 18 years old. And 60% of the women in the Congress, by the way, were also Girl Scouts. 60%, almost 2/3. But actually, I met Cesar when I was about 25 years old. And we both worked in an organization called the Community Service Organization, and we were both trained by a great human being named Fred Ross Sr. He's the one that taught us how to organize. So I was about 25 when I first met Cesar.
We'll take 2 more questions.
It's an honor to see you again, Senora Huerta. You inspire not just young people, but all races. Thank you very much. My question to you, if Cesar Chavez would be next to you today, how far are you contained with what you guys achieve?
Well, I think that we laid a foundation. We still have a long way to go. As I said earlier, we know that a lot of farm workers still don't have the benefits that a few farm workers have under union contracts. And so there's a lot of work that's still to be done, and we know that we still have a lot of discrimination that exists in our society. So I think that we made maybe a dent, and we laid a foundation, and we have a formula how things can change by this grassroots organizing like we do in my foundation, the Dolores Huerta Foundation. By the way, people can look at our website, okay? DoloresHuerta.org if they want to contribute to our website, but to our organization. So we have, we have developed a way that people can organize to make it happen, but we know that there's not enough resources for organizers. If we had enough money, I'm sure there's people here in the room that would volunteer to say, I'll go out there and help organize to make things happen. We could send organizers to the 18 Republicans that are refusing to vote for immigration reform right now. We have 18 Republicans that are holding up immigration reform. If we had money, we could send people to all of those areas. So that's what we need. We just need more resources so that we can train more organizers, and then we can really create a true democracy in our United States of America. Make this
This will be our last question.
I just would like to say thank you so much for coming. It's been such an honor to listen. As a current teacher and someone who actually is looking to follow in your footsteps of community organizing, what would be my first step after the classroom? So I really want eventually to become an advocate for teachers so that teachers can deliver a better education to our students. What would you say my first step would be, or anybody else who would like to follow in your footsteps?
Well, I think the first thing to do is to get somebody to join with you, so that you're not by yourself. Get the militant few, as we call it. When Cesar and I started the Farm Workers Union, there was only the three of us, Cesar, his wife Helen, and myself. Pretty soon his cousin Manuel joined us, and then we had other people. And I like to tell people, when you see the movie, you're going to see the March to Sacramento. There were 70 people that started that march. When we got to Sacramento, there were 10,000, okay? So it just started with a few people, talking and organizing. And I think one of the things for teachers that we really have to advocate for, and I have a daughter who's a teacher, by the way, but that they need to be paid more money, It's a sin that you can get more money working in a prison as a correctional guard with a high school education than you can as a teacher with a bachelor's or a master's degree. And by the way, all you students out there, don't stop at your bachelor's. You got to go for your doctorates, okay? We need more people in higher education.
Well, let's give a big round of applause to Dolores Huerta.
Si se puede, right? Yeah. Si se puede means not only that we can do it, but that all of us together, our community, our students collective, all of us together, we can do it. All of us working together, we can make it happen. So I would like to end with a big old si se puede. Okay, let's put our hands up and let's do it all together in an organized way. Let's go. Let's go.